Hi guys, and welcome back to another tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to build this really simple marketing website landing page. There's a few components that we can build out, so I'm going to show you how we can build this in Gatsby. Gatsby is a React based static site generator, so it allows you to build websites that are really fast, really SEO friendly, and just really good for everyday websites really. So we're going to be using Gatsby, like I said, so there's a couple of things we need to do to get Gatsby up and running first. First thing to do is to install the command line interface. This allows you to use the Gatsby commands to build sites and get your sites up and running. So the first thing to do is run this command. I've already done this, so I won't do this step. But once you've done that, in your terminal, just head to your sites folder or wherever all your websites are kept and just run that command in there, and that's actually going to run it globally because you're using the global flag, so that's going to run all over your machine and you can use it from anywhere in the future. The next step is we're going to use the Gatsby CLI to create a new Gatsby website. All we need to do is run this really simple command. We're using npm and we're going to initialize a new Gatsby website. So copy that and paste it, and then it's going to ask you a few questions. So what do we want to call our website? Our design is called Zap Marketing, so I'll just call it that. And then it's just going to double check if you're happy with the name of the folder, which is Zap Marketing. So I'll say yes. It's going to ask you a few more questions. First one is which CMS you want to use, but for now we're just going to say no. We might add one in later on, but for now we'll say no. Are we using any styling systems? We are going to use Sas, but I'll show you how to install that yourselves, just so you know. So just press no for now. And then would you like any of these other features? For now we're just going to hit done because we don't want any of those. It's just going to ask if you're happy with everything you've said. So press Y or yes, and that's going to build the site for you. Cool, so once that's finished running, you can see here there's a couple of commands that it tells us to do, and this will get our site up and running. So first of all, change directory into your new folder. And you can see here ours is called Zap Marketing, and then we're going to run npm run develop, which is a Gatsby command to build the website for you. This only takes a couple of seconds, runs through, tells you all the things that it's doing. And then a few seconds later, we should be given a development URL, which we can click on. If you hold Command on a Mac or Control on a Windows, you can click on this link, and it'll take us to our new website. And here you can see it. This is one of the pages that Gatsby gives us by default, and we're going to be editing this page soon. But there you go. You've got our Gatsby website up and running. So the next step is to open your code editor. So I use VS Code. I find it just a really good code editor. There's tons and tons of plugins and add-ons that you can use, and yeah, just nice and simple. Anything will do though, brackets, Sublime Text, anything, PHP Storm, any of them will be good enough. Cool, so once you've got your project open in your code editor, just open up the source and you can see we've got images and pages. That's all that there's there at the minute. Really simple. There's a few other files in here, but you don't really need to pay too much attention to them. Cache and node modules are just generated files that we don't need to worry about. Public is where the Gatsby builds your website, so this is where the browser's reading from. So this is stuff that we don't need to worry about. It's been rendered for us. So we only need to really worry about the source folder and then this Gatsby config folder, but I'll explain that in a little bit. So inside source we've got images. For now there's just an icon which we can see, and we've got pages. We've got two pages, a 404 page which is shown every time there's an error, and our index page, which if I go down to this content, you can see here it says you just made a Gatsby site, and if we look at our site again, you can see this is the text being rendered here. So if we change that text, let's say you just made your first Gatsby site, you save that and go back to your browser, you can see that's changed already. The good thing about Gatsby is it has automatic reloading built in, so as soon as you save anything, it's going to reload that on the browser, which is good. If you want to have a deep dive into Gatsby, feel free to check out these tutorials and documentation. I'm just going to go ahead and build our marketing page. So the first thing we're going to want to do is clear out all of this default stuff. So this is a load of content that we can get rid of, and this is a load of styles that we can get rid of. This is using styled components. We're not going to actually use that methodology. It's a really good way of incorporating JavaScript into your styles, but we're not going to need to do that for now, so I'll explain what we're going to do in a little bit. We can also get rid of all of this markup. We don't need it, so let's go with it. And if we just add a h1 tag that says hello world, save that, and we can see now our page is nice and blank and we have a good starting point. Cool. So first thing we're going to want to do is add a couple of folders to get us going. So inside your source, add a new folder called components, and that's where all of our components are going to live. So if we look at our design again, we can see there's a few components, and I've broken that down in another design so we can see what we're going to build. So we're going to have the header, which is just sort of the nav bar section. We're going to have this sort of intro content, which is just a title and a link. We're going to have this sort of hero image or featured image or something, which would just be a whatever your landing page is all about. I've nicked this design from Dribble, so I will credit the artist, the designer, in the comments in the description. And then we've got the last component is just a little footer that we're gonna add on as well. Cool. So the first thing we're going to build is this nav bar. So back to our code editor. Inside components, we're going to create a new folder called navbar, and then inside there we're going to create a file called index.js and another file called styles.module.scss. And I'll show you why that's called that in a minute. So to start with, we go back to our index file and we're going to copy this page, all this content from the page, our index.js. So just copy and paste that in. All this is doing really simple. It's importing React, because Gatsby is a static site generator, but it runs on the React framework. And then we're just creating a function, which is what React is. Everything's function based. And then we're exporting that function to be used in the site. So Gatsby takes this function and renders the content that it returns and makes that into the content on your page. So first of all, we're going to rename this. We're going to call it navbar. In React, components start with capital letters, so always make sure to do that. And for now, we're just going to return a h1, or we'll return a div actually, and then inside a h1 that says navbar. Really simple. So we can go, if we go to our page now, obviously nothing's going to render here yet because we're not telling it to show our navbar. So we need to import our navbar. So we're going to say import navbar from, and then you need to find the component. So it's back to our components folder, back to our navbar folder. If we just direct to our navbar folder, it automatically looks for index.js, so we don't need to have index.js on there as well. It just automatically looks for that. Now if we render our component, because there's nothing inside of our component, it's just it is its own thing, if that makes sense. We can have a self-closing component. So if we had a div, for example, we might want to have some content inside there, but navbar doesn't need any content inside of it, so we can just have a self-closing component. So if we save that now, what we'll see is everything pulled from this return, so a div and a h1, is pulled from the return, exported, and then we're pulling it into the header, into the index page, sorry. So we've got navbar, we're pulling it in here from that path, and then we're returning it here. So if we go back to our browser, we should see Navbar. Cool. So now we need to start styling our navbar. So first of all, we're going to grab these colors. So that blue. So what we're going to do here is use Sas modules or CSS modules. It's a really cool way of styling things. There's loads and loads of documentation about it, but basically the really easy way to explain it is if you use modules, Gatsby or React is going to automatically add some letters and numbers to your classes, which means that it's really specifically scoped to that component. So if we had I don't know, dot header as a class and then did background red, if we were just using normal CSS, everywhere that this header class is used, this background red would be applied. But because we're using modules, this only applies to this component. So you could write really generic things like body or anything, and they're only going to be applied to this component. So if we just show that, so navbar is going to be red, but because we're using Sas, Gatsby doesn't have Sas out the box, so we need to install the Sas module, which is really simple. Go back to, if you just Google Gatsby Sas, the first link is the one you need, and you can just see here there's another command that allows us to install everything we need. So we're going to install Sas, and we're also going to install the Gatsby Sas plugin. So just copy this, stop our project from running, paste in that command and hit enter, and that's going to install both of those libraries in a couple of seconds. And then if we just run our npm run develop again, that's going to get our site running again. But now this project has Sas installed, we can use Sas throughout the project, and I'll show you how we get it into our components. So we're using the class name navbar. If we go back to our navbar, we've got a div here, so we need to add a class name. In React, class has been replaced with class name, so rather than in HTML or other languages we can just say class, in React we need to say class name. So because we're using modules, we need to import our styles as a JavaScript object. So how we do that is we say import asterisk, and asterisk kind of means all. So we're going to say import all as styles from, and then the path to our file. So the file is in the same directory, so we just need to say styles.module .scss. So that is just pulling everything that's in the folder, everything that's in the file into a variable or an object called styles, and we're getting it from this path, styles.module.scss, which we can see here is the name. One way to make sure you get it right is just to copy that whole thing and then put that in there. You can call styles whatever you want. You know, we could call it navbar if you want it to be, you know, really specific. But the only thing you need to remember is that the middle word module has to be module, and that's how JavaScript or React knows to add the modules to it. So there we go. So we've imported it into our JavaScript file. Just to double check we've got everything coming in, we can console that now. If I console it inside of the component, we can say console.log, and then if we say styles, this should give us a text that says styles and then return the actual styles themselves. So if we go back to our website, just refresh it. Oh, something's gone wrong. What does that mean? Okay, it's because we've got an empty string here. If we just get rid of that now, we can add that back in a minute, I think. So I know what we've done. We've missed one step, a vital step. So if we go back to our Gatsby Sas, we also need to include this configuration. So we've installed the plugin, we've installed Gatsby plugin Sas, but we haven't told Gatsby to look for that plugin, so it doesn't know to run it. So how we do that is we copy this name, which is Gatsby plugin Sas. We go back to our file structure, and this Gatsby config file, which we talked about earlier. You can see here there's an empty array called plugins, so we're just going to drop to a new line and include that plugin name. So that now tells Gatsby every time you run that we need to run that plugin. So if we save that, stop our Gatsby and run develop again, now when it loads it should have Sas running out of the box and we shouldn't see any of those errors. And there you go, there's no errors. So if we go back to our page and refresh, you can see now there's no errors. But what we did was we consoled out the styles. So now if we open up our dev tools, we can see that there's a console log here called styles, and if we open that up, there's a few different bits. There's a nav bar, which is what we've added here. Nav bar is an object inside of that, and you can see this is the styles that are going to get applied. So you can see here this is the letters and numbers, or just letters maybe, that are applied to the class to make it really specific. So yeah, that's going to get applied to our div, and that will make it really specific to this component. So now if we go back to our component and get rid of that now. So how we style things, like I said earlier, we say class name, and then we're going to have an open object, or this is just to allow us to pass JavaScript into the JSX. So just very quickly, this isn't HTML, although it looks very much like it. It's actually JSX, which is sort of a JavaScript markup language, kind of. Quite hard to explain quickly, but it's very similar to HTML, but it's what React uses to render components. So this is how we pass JavaScript variables or anything else into our HTML. So we're going to pass in styles, but styles is a big object, so just like in our console, we want to just pass in this navbar bit. So we say styles.navbar. So these styles now, anything inside navbar should be applied to this div. So the only thing we've got at the minute is background red. So if we open up our website, we can see that there's a red background being applied. So that's working perfectly. Cool. So we can see now that there's a couple of things that aren't quite right. You can see here that there's some padding margin on the body, which means that there's some space around our component, which doesn't look quite right, and just some other things that aren't quite right. So we're gonna fix those now. So now that we've got our first component up and running, we're going to create a new folder called Sas, and this is just going to hold all of our global Sas that needs using across multiple components, or some really basic resets to get our website looking right. So first of all, we're going to add a basics.scss file. Like I said, this is just going to be a really simple reset that we're going to pass into all of our pages just to make them look right. So we just create that in a new folder called Sas. We can go to our page and we can import that. So we're going to import, find the file, .scss. Cool, so once you've saved that, if we go back to our website, you can sort of see the spacing at the sides gone, and if we just inspect the element, you can see now that that's being applied to our body. Cool, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a container component so that we can sort of keep everything inside this sort of column that we've got. That'll make it really responsive, and it'll make it easier to sort of keep things consistent across the page. So all we're going to do to make this really simple, we're going to copy, if you click on navbar here and press Command or Control C to copy it, and then click on Components and Command or Control V, that's going to copy and paste navbar again. Sounds more complicated than it is, just copy and paste the component folder basically. And we're going to rename this and we're going to call it container. So if we pop into our container component, we can see it all still says navbar. So if we replace all of these things with container for now, There we go. Cool, so if we go back to our home page, if we just duplicate this page and change everything to container, pull in our container, save. You'll see there's an error here. It's because React doesn't like having multiple elements in the same sort of nested level, if that makes sense. So we need one parent element basically. We can use something called a React fragment, which is just kind of like an empty braces kind of. And React is more than happy with this. It just shows that there's one element at the top and then these are all children of that element. Again, hard to explain, but that's just a React thing. So if we go back to our page, we can see that container is now on the page as well, which is perfect, but it's not doing anything. It's not doing what we want to do. Container is it's different than Navbar. It's going to be a component, sorry, that has elements inside of it. So we can't have a self-closing component. It's going to be a component, like I say, that has children. So Navbar is now inside container, but it doesn't really work because although we're telling it to be inside there, in our container component, we're not saying that there should be anything given to it, if that makes sense. There's no children or elements to be placed inside of it. So how we do that is we use props. So we're going to pass a children prop to container. Now children is like a special word that React knows, and if you pass in the term children, it knows that it's expecting things to be passed inside of it. So then if we use these braces again to tell JSX we're going to use some JavaScript, we're just going to tell it anything that's passed in as children to output in between this div. So if we save that now, we should see Navbar again. And just to make sure that's working, if we inspect our page, you can see that there's Navbar here, and then this div is our container div. There's no classes on it because container doesn't have any styles, which is something to remember. But if we add a container style, make that blue, and save, now you can see containers there with our blue, and then Navbar's there with red. If I just add some padding and a box sizing, you can see now that our container's blue and our Navbar's red. Perfect. So that works kind of. It looks kind of right, but if you think back to how things are going to work, so our navbar is actually this whole row, and then we want the container to be inside of that. So really, we want container to be inside of navbar, and then children of that component are going to be what's in between the row. So if we go to our navbar component, we're going to pull a component into here now. So import navbar from navbar. Sorry, getting confused. Import container from container, and then we're going to put that inside of the navbar div. And we can still keep our text. So now we've got our navbar component, which starts here. Then we've got a container inside of it, which is going to be blue still because it's pulling it in from the container component. And then we're going to have the text inside that says navbar. So what we should see now is the red navbar. Well, we will do if we add some more. If we add some padding here, let's add box sizing. So what we're going to see now is a red navbar with our blue container and then the text inside of that. Let's go back to our website. We've got the red navbar, blue container, and our text. This container is still appearing because we added our container on the home page. So we can actually remove that and remove the React fragment now because there's only one element at the top level. Oops. There we go. So if we save that, go back to our website, we've got a red navbar, blue container. Cool. We're starting to get somewhere now. So if we go back to navbar, we can get rid of all of these because that's not how it's going to look. What we want it to look like is this. So we've got our logo here, got some text links, and another CTA. But we need these colors So if we go to our Photoshop file, we can grab this hex code for our color, and we can save it as a variable. So if we create a new file called variables.scss, now we can create any variable we want in here that can be used across the whole website. You can do this for things like colors, font sizes, spacing, anything like that. So we're going to just add a comment to let us to remind us that all of our colors are going to go here. So if we want to call one blue, you just add a $sign followed by the variable name. And there we go, that's blue saved as a variable. We'll do it for all of our colors, so we've got white. And that's it, that's all the colors we use. So save that. This is really useful because if you wanted to change this blue at any point, you could change it in one place, just here, and it'd change all the blues across the whole website. So it's just really easy to maintain and use going forward. So back to our design. Navbar has a blue background, so we're going to say background color is blue. And that's our variable that we're pulling in. So we need to also include that variables file inside this component. Currently it doesn't know what blue is. If I save that and look on the website, it's going to complain that it doesn't know what blue is, basically. Blue is an undefined variable. So all we need to do to fix that is import our variables folder, or our file, sorry. So we go import and then go back to the file and then import variables. So now all the variables are going to get pulled in and we can now use that here. So go back to our website. You can't see it because the container is making it look bad, but if we had a padding of 50 pixels, you can see now there's a nice blue background color. Let's remove the container color because that's never gonna be there. There we go. So we're starting to see what our website's gonna look like. Cool. So although we've got container and things are sort of contained within that container, it's not doing anything, so there's no size restrictions, or we're not keeping to a consistent size. So let's add some styles to our container to make it look right. So we're going to give it a max width of 1400 pixels, and then if we look at our website now, it doesn't look like it's changed much. We can see here that our navbar, our navbar container doesn't seem to be okay. I just refreshed and maybe it got cached, or it wasn't working properly. But we can see here our container now has a max width of 1400 pixels, but it's not centered. It's over to the left hand side. So what we can do to change that is add all we need to do is add margin 0 auto. So that means top and bottom is 0 margin and left and right is auto, which means it will be centered. So now we can see it's sort of moved over, which means it's centered. And that's it. That's our container done, really. Something I always like to do, so if we were looking at this on a mobile device and our navbar didn't have any padding, you'd see that it'd be right up against the left hand side. To keep that consistent, I like to add a little bit of padding to the container just to keep it consistent across all components, just left and right. So we've got 0 top and bottom, and left and right has 30. So no matter what device you're on, there's always going to be a little bit of padding, which just keeps it looking nice and spaced. Cool, so you can see here now we've got a white gap. That's because of the margin on this text, so don't worry about that. That isn't going to be there eventually. But another way we can get rid of that is just to add a padding top and bottom on our navbar. See now it's spaced out nicely. Cool, so we've got sort of three elements in here, if you like. We've got our logo, our little text links, and our CTA. So let's add those to our navbar. Inside container, we're going to have an A tag, which is going to be our logo. And we're just going to say, is that marketing? Then we're going to have a UL, which is an unordered list. with an li inside of it, which is a list item, and we're going to have about, solutions, and work. We're also going to have a tags here, about, solutions, work. And after the list, we're going to have our contact CTA. So that's just going to be an ahref again. It says contact. So this isn't going to look very good at the minute. It's going to look pretty bad actually. But what we're going to do is style these up now. So we're going to use Flex to style up our components. We're going to make it really simple for ourselves. We're going to add another component inside of this called class name equals styles .navbar inner, and then paste all of our little elements back into there. And this means we can add some flex styles to this component, which is going to really make it easy to manipulate and easy to make look good. So head back to our navbar. We're going to go to navbar inner, and we're going to say display flex. And already you'll see that that starts spacing things out. It doesn't look quite right, but they're all in a row now. We're also going to say justify content space between, which does exactly what it says. It's going to have a justified amount of space between each component. Now you can see there's a space here that's equal to this space here. We're also going to say align items center, which just vertically aligns them all, so you can see now they're all in a line. And last thing we're going to do is flex wrap and wrap. So that means if at any point the components are too long to go in one row, they'll just drop down to the next line. We probably won't have that problem, but it's just a good thing to do just in case. Cool, so let's get styling these components. So in our navbar, for our logo, we're going to add a class name of styles.logo. So like I said earlier, you can make this as generic as you want because it's only going to be scoped inside of this component. So we can say .logo, we're going to say color is white, font size is 24 pixels, text decoration is none, that's going to get rid of the underline. And there we go, we've got a logo. And we're going to do a very similar thing for the links. So first of all, we need to add a class name, styles.list, and then for each of these we're going to say class name styles.list item, and then this last one we're going to call it class name styles.cta. Cool, so in our styles then we're going to have list. Just some good resets to do on any list is a margin 0 and padding 0. You can see that changes slightly, just gets rid of all the spacing around it. Then we're going to have a list item. Gatsby is really cool actually. This is how we call our class names in JSX. We need to have all one word, and then it's called Camel Case, where you have the first letter of each word is going to be capitalized, and then Gatsby automatically translates that into a hyphenated version. So you could have it like that, navbar inner, or you can have it this way, which is just a little bit easier to read. So that's something that Gatsby does out of the box. Cool. So margin 0 on the list item, padding 0 as well, and then list style type none. That's going to get rid of the bullet point. Then there's a couple of ways we could do this, but we're going to say display flex on our list, and that's going to put them all in a row. Cool. Then we need to style the anchor tag inside of our list item. So we're just going to say display block, which means there we can add padding and things like that. Then we're going to add a padding of 10 pixels, and then we're going to just copy these three styles because they're going to be very similar, but we're just going to change this font size to 16. So refresh that and we can see we've got some links. Perfect. And then the last one, we're just going to copy all of this again, and we're going to say .cta and we're going to make it inline block because it's on its own, it's not inside of an LI, so we need to make it an inline block so it doesn't take up the whole width. We're going to change the color to blue and the background color to white, and then we're going to change the font size just a bit bigger to 18. And there we go, we can see we've got our basic button. So let's make that a little bit more like what we'd expect to see. So we're going to say padding, maybe 13 and 20 pixels. That's a bit better, maybe 25. And then we're going to have a border radius of about 5 pixels. And there we go, that'll do for now. We can tidy all this up later. You'll notice though that the font isn't quite right. This is a Google font called Poppins, so we're going to use that font as well. So if you just Google fonts Poppins, it's the first link. Oh, I think I said Poopins, but we're using Poppins. We can select any of these, but we're just going to select regular and maybe semi-bold, just in case we want to use it. So go over here, click the import option. That means you can import it straight into CSS. And copy and paste this import rule. Don't worry about the style tags, but we're going to paste this straight into our variables folder, and this is going to import Poppins into our project. So the next thing we want to copy and paste, copy this second half of this rule, and we're going to turn this into a variable. So we can say fonts, and we'll have a variable called Poppins, and we're going to add that rule. So anytime we call Poppins, it'll replace it with this. So what we need to do is we need to say on the logo, the item link and the CTA, we're going to say font family is Poppins. If you check the website again now, you can see all of this is changed and it's looking much better. So that's sort of, we're getting there. The last thing to do about the nav bar is we've got the little icon that we need to add in, and then you'll notice that this section is further over to the left than this section. We're gonna fix that as well. So the first thing to do is for the logo, we're gonna make it position relative, and we're gonna add a before. Before is a pseudo class that you can add to any or most elements, and it just allows you to add some styling before and after. Yeah, they're just like elements that every div or element can have added to it. Again, hard to explain, but really simple when you get the hang of it. So the first thing we need to do is add content nothing, because there's not going to be any content with it. The height is going to be 25 pixels, width 25 pixels, and it's going to have a border, maybe 2 pixels solid white. We have a look at our site now. Great. So you can see it's not quite right. If I just inspect that, we can see why. So we've got height and a width. Maybe we just need a display inline block. Yep, there we go. You can see it's not quite right, but it's getting there. So display inline block. And there's a couple of ways that we could change the sort of vertical alignment of it. The first way is to maybe vertical line middle, and that seems to work. Vertical line middle, good. Vertical line middle. And then the last one we want to do is add a little bit of margin to the right of it. Margin right is going to be 15 pixels maybe. Cool, that's sort of looking close enough. Yeah, that'll do for now. Maybe we want to make it a little bit bigger, but yeah, I'm just nitpicking now. That'll do. So your last thing is we want to make this element a bit closer up, so it's further away from this one and just looks a bit more stylized and a bit more considered. So how are we going to do that? Really simple. Because we're using flex on the navbar inner and it's spacing all of these elements out equally, all we need to do is grab these two, add them into another div. We'll call this Nav Bar Left. Paste those in, And now you can see at the root of this there's only 2 elements. So our navbar inner is going to space those out equally. So if we do a refresh now, we can see they're kind of pushed over here, and we'll fix that in a minute. But you can see they're pushed over to the left and this is over to the right. What we need to do now is style our navbar left, which is going to have very few styles, really simple to do. I'm going to say navbar left is going to be display flex, align item center, flex wrap, wrap. Refresh again, you can see they're next to each other now. Perfect. Last thing we need to do is add a little bit of spacing in between here just to achieve this sort of design. So on our list we're going to say replace this margin 0 with we need a left margin of about, I don't know, 150 pixels maybe. So if you know the CSS shorthand, we can do all 4 sides in here, so top, right, middle, left. Save that. Oops, not minus, don't know why I did that. And there you go, you can see it's pushed over. And that is pretty much the nav bar done. We're going to make it responsive eventually, but for now it's looking pretty good. And we're going to end that video there, and in the next video we're going to come back, we're going to create this intro section, and we're going to create this sort of dashboard hero image, and we're going to tackle this footer as well. But in this video what we've conquered is we've created a Gatsby project, we've created our first components, and we've started styling components. We've used styling modules, CSS modules, to locally scope all of the styles for our components, which is really, really useful if you're building big applications. We've also created a couple of variables which we're now using in the components. So these are, you know, your basic everyday front-end developer techniques that you're going to be using in the big wide world. So well done. Tune in next time for the next tutorial, and I will get this marketing page looking really, really good. Cool. Speak to you later, guys. Goodbye.